In the dimly lit corridors of medieval Europe, where parchment crackled under candlelight and kingdoms rose or fell upon the whims of war, faith, and fortune, the Knights Templar emerged not merely as warriors of the cross, but as the quiet architects of a financial system that would one day echo through the chambers of modern banking. Their journey into the world of currency, credit, and capital began almost accidentally, born from a perfect convergence of trust, necessity, and the extraordinary mobility demanded by holy pilgrimage. As thousands of Christians traveled perilous roads toward Jerusalem, burdened not only by danger but by the fear of theft, the Templars recognized an opportunity hidden behind the veil of piety: the creation of a mechanism through which wealth could travel safely without ever being physically carried. From this seed grew a network so vast and efficient that kings became borrowers, merchants became clients, and entire crusades were financed by men in white mantles marked with a red cross. Their commanderies stretched from London to Acre, each one acting like a proto-bank branch, receiving deposits, issuing letters of credit, transferring funds across continents, and in some cases, even operating as treasuries for monarchs who found the Templars' management far more reliable than their own ministers. Yet behind the austere stone walls of their fortresses lay a complexity that few outside the order ever fully understood. Ledgers meticulously kept, rates calculated not in terms of interest since usury was forbidden, but through ingenious fees and service charges that skirted theological boundaries, and a standardized system of documentation that allowed a pilgrim to deposit coins in Paris and retrieve the equivalent sum in Jerusalem with nothing more than a coded slip of parchment. Such sophistication raised both admiration and suspicion, for while the Templars' power was born of trust, it also bred envy among rulers who watched the order's wealth accumulate like a silent tide. As the century turned and conflicts multiplied, monarchs increasingly leaned on the Templars to finance wars, stabilize currencies, and safeguard national treasuries, creating a paradox in which an ostensibly religious military order became the backbone of Europe's financial infrastructure. This shift did not go unnoticed, particularly by King Philip IV of France, whose extravagant campaigns and disastrous monetary policies pushed him into chronic debt with the very knights he was meant to command spiritually. It was in this crucible of royal desperation and institutional wealth that suspicion began to fester, evolving into accusations of heresy and conspiracy that would eventually become the pretext for the Templars' downfall. Yet before the flames of persecution engulfed them, the order reached a zenith unlike anything Europe had seen. They managed not only the savings of nobles and the dowries of queens, but also the payrolls of armies, the storage of relics, and the logistics of large-scale military operations. Their financial acumen allowed crusading forces to remain supplied even when separated from home by thousands of miles, their garrisons funded through an intricate web of transfers that mirrored modern wire payments. Their sealed vaults held treasures so immense that chroniclers spoke of them with awe, describing chests of silver stacked like bricks in a cathedral wall. More astonishing still was their ability to maintain internal discipline against embezzlement in an age when corruption was endemic. Rigorous audits, strict penalties, and an ethos of poverty ensured that wealth flowed through the order without adhering to any single knight. Thus the Templars, forged in the deserts of the Holy Land, became anchors of stability in a Europe often torn by famine, plague, and ceaseless war. Their reputation for integrity was so strong that even rival factions trusted them to mediate disputes involving money, land, and inheritance. And their influence seeped into local economies as villages grew around Templar estates that practiced advanced agriculture and reinvested profits into regional development. They became, in essence, early masters of diversified portfolios, balancing revenues from estates, mills, vineyards, and trade with the ever-growing demand for secure financial services. The deeper one peers into this system, the more one sees the skeleton of modern banking taking shape. Deposit accounts, credit instruments, international transfers, and even the equivalent of safe deposit boxes, all protected by a brand so powerful that even illiterate peasants recognized the Red Cross as a symbol of absolute security. But such power attracted shadows, and as the 14th century dawned, Whispers circulated that the Templars had become too wealthy, too independent, too untouchable for the comfort of kings. Philip IV, desperate to free himself from debt and strengthen his grip on the French throne, found fertile ground for schemes that could dismantle the order. The Pope, pressured from all sides, struggled to balance the spiritual authority of the Church against the political machinations of monarchs who saw the Templar fortune as the key to their own salvation. Yet even as accusations multiplied charges of heresy, indecency, secret rites, Europe's financial world trembled at the thought of losing the institution that had quietly stabilized its economies for nearly 2 centuries. Their arrests came swiftly, their leaders tortured into confessions, and their assets seized by crowns eager to plunder what they had long envied. But monarchs soon discovered a profound irony. While they could confiscate Templar property, they could not so easily replicate Templar expertise. The infrastructure collapsed, leaving behind a vacuum that would take generations to fill. And in the aftermath, Europe stumbled toward new financial models that borrowed heavily from the innovations the order had introduced. What remained was a legacy whispered in chronicles and encoded in ledgers, a testament to how a group of warrior monks reshaped the economic landscape of the continent and laid the foundations for systems that endure to this day. A reminder that power does not always flow from swords, but from the subtle magic of trust, accounting, and the movement of money across borders, and how their journey as bankers ultimately transformed not only the Crusades but the entire fabric of European civilization, shaping the destiny of nations in ways no one could have foreseen, as the Red Cross fluttered above their commanderies and the quiet scribes recorded ever. Why transaction with the same solemn precision as a monk illuminating a sacred manuscript, while beneath it all ran a current of tension between faith and finance, loyalty and ambition, a current that would one day swell into a storm the order could not escape, even as their innovations continued to echo through the centuries that followed, influencing systems that would evolve into modern banks, credit networks, and global finance. A legacy as enduring as stone yet as fragile as the trust upon which it was built, leaving behind a story that begins not with the clang of swords, but with the scratch of a quill on parchment, tracing numbers that would one day decide the fate of kings and the future of Europe. A story that even now feels unfinished, as historians debate how much wealth the Templars truly controlled and how deeply their financial genius permeated the world they left behind, raising the question of whether their rise to economic mastery was a fortunate accident or an inevitable consequence of their unique position within Christendom, a question that continues to invite speculation, admiration, and wonder as we delve deeper into the extraordinary tale of how warriors became bankers and how bankers became the silent engines driving the ambitions of an entire continent through an age of faith, conflict, and transformation. A tale that leads us inevitably toward the moment when everything they built began to unravel, when the courts convened and the accusations mounted, when the Red Cross that once symbolized trust began to cast a shadow of suspicion that would soon engulf even the most devoted defenders of the order. And it is here, standing on the threshold of their downfall, that we must pause. Just as the final layers of intrigue begin to unfold, and the fate of the Templars hangs precariously between loyalty and betrayal, between faith and fear, between the quiet strength of their financial genius and the swelling tide of political ambition that would soon sweep across Europe like a storm that then swallowed kingdoms whole, turning suspicion into decree and decree into catastrophe as the machinery of royal power ground into motion, seizing men who only days before had been guardians of Europe's wealth, dragging them from commanderies where ledgers still lay open and vaults still echoed with the quiet confidence of a system that had never truly imagined its own end. What followed was not the swift collapse of a corrupt institution, but the slow suffocation of one whose enemies understood that perception was more lethal than truth. For as interrogators tightened their grip and confessions wrung from torture rather than guilt spread across Christendom, doubt began to stain even those who had once trusted the Red Cross with their fortunes. And the vast financial network the Templars built started to unravel thread by thread. Each severed line of credit, each seized estate, each frozen account weakening not only the order, but the very economies that had depended on its reliability. Yet in the midst of dissolution, an eerie paradox emerged. The kings who dismantled the Templars discovered they could not replicate their stability, and treasuries that once thrived under disciplined stewardship slid into chaos, while merchants who once moved freely across borders found themselves navigating a fractured landscape where trust had evaporated like dust in a desert wind. Even so, the Templars themselves endured their final chapter with a grim dignity, refusing to betray the secrets of their financial methods even as their bodies were broken, understanding perhaps that knowledge was a treasure no crown could seize. And when Grand Master Jacques de Molay stood before the pyre in 1314, flames reflecting like molten gold in his eyes, his final curse on the king and the pope was less an act of vengeance than the last defiant assertion of a legacy built on order, precision, and unwavering faith in a system that outlived him in ways no executioner could foresee. For although the order vanished, its ideas did not. Merchants reassembled the fragments of Templar practice into new instruments of credit. Italian bankers refined the techniques once sketched on Templar parchment, and the very notion that value could move across distance without physical coins, an idea born in the dust of Crusader roads, became the silent foundation upon which global finance would one day rise. Thus, the Templars, though condemned as heretics, became architects of a future they would never witness, their downfall marking not the end of innovation, but the beginning of an evolution in economic thought, as if the flames that consumed them also tempered the iron of Europe's financial destiny. And when historians sift through the ashes of their story, what emerges is not merely the tragedy of an order destroyed by envy and politics, but the enduring truth that the greatest power they wielded was not military might, but the invisible architecture of trust they built across a world divided by war, a truth that resonates even now in every transaction, every transfer, every signed promise, backed by nothing more than confidence. An echo of the warrior bankers, whose red cross once guarded the fortunes of a continent, and whose legacy, though buried under centuries of myth, continues to beat softly beneath the pulse of modern civilization.